The dense forest of Konoha was alive with the rustling of leaves and the distant chirping of birds, but Naruto Uzumaki barely noticed. His bright orange jumpsuit stood out against the greenery as he sprinted through the trees, his sandals kicking up dust with every leap. He had been training for weeks, pushing his limits under Kakashi's watchful eye, and today was supposed to be just another routine mission. But something felt off. The air was too still, the usual chatter of his teammates absent. Sakura and Sasuke had been sent ahead to scout, leaving Naruto to follow the trail alone. A sudden gust of wind sent a shiver down his spine, and Naruto skidded to a halt on a thick branch, his blue eyes narrowing. "Who's there?" he called out, his voice echoing through the trees. No answer came, but the shadows between the trunks seemed to shift unnaturally, stretching and twisting like living things. Naruto's fingers twitched, ready to form a seal. He wasn't about to be caught off guard. Then, from the darkness, a low chuckle emerged, smooth and mocking. The famous Naruto Uzumaki, all alone? How convenient. The voice seemed to come from everywhere at once, bouncing off the trees like a taunt. Naruto's fists clenched. "Show yourself," he demanded, his patience wearing thin. The shadows pooled together, swirling like ink in water, until a figure emerged, tall, cloaked in black, with a porcelain mask covering the lower half of his face. His eyes, visible through the slits, gleamed with amusement. "You're as loud as they say," the stranger mused, tilting his head. "But let's see if your skills match your reputation." Naruto didn't wait for another word. With a burst of chakra, he lunged forward, his fist aimed straight for the masked man's gut. But before he could connect, the ground beneath him erupted, and a puppet, skeletal, with jagged blades for fingers, shot upward, blocking the blow with a metallic clang. Naruto flipped backward, landing in a crouch as more puppets emerged from the shadows, their hollow eyes locking onto him. "A Puppetmaster, huh?" Naruto muttered, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. He'd fought puppeteers before, but something about this one felt different. The way the shadows clung to the puppets, the way they moved with eerie precision, it was like they were alive. The masked man raised a hand, and the puppets surged forward, their blades glinting in the dappled sunlight. Naruto dodged the first strike, rolling to the side as a second puppet slashed at his back. He barely avoided it, feeling the wind from the blade ruffle his hair. "Shadow Clone Jutsu," he shouted, and a dozen copies of himself materialized in a puff of smoke, charging at the puppets with identical battle cries. The forest became a whirlwind of motion, clones and puppets clashing, wood splintering, metal screeching. Naruto weaved through the chaos, landing a solid kick on one puppet's head, sending it crashing into a tree. But for every one he destroyed, another seemed to take its place. The masked man hadn't moved, his arms crossed as he observed the fight with detached interest. Naruto gritted his teeth. He needed to get to the source. With a quick hand sign, he summoned a Rasengan in his palm, the swirling sphere of chakra humming with power. He dashed forward, his clones covering his advance, and aimed straight for the Puppetmaster. But just as he was about to strike, the man's shadow stretched unnaturally, twisting into a solid form that intercepted the attack. The Rasengan collided with the shadowy barrier, sending shockwaves through the air, but it held firm. Naruto's eyes widened. "What the?" The Puppetmaster chuckled again. "Surprised? My shadows aren't just for show." With a flick of his wrist, the shadowy tendrils lashed out, wrapping around Naruto's arms and legs like chains. He struggled, but the grip was ironclad. The masked man stepped closer, his voice dripping with condescension. "You rely too much on brute force. A real shinobi knows when to think." Naruto's breath came in short gasps, but his determination burned brighter. "Yeah? Well, this brute's not done yet." With a roar, he channeled Kurama's chakra, his body erupting in a fiery red aura. The shadowy bonds shattered like glass, and the Puppetmaster actually took a step back, his amusement fading into wariness. The fight was far from over. The air crackled with tension as Naruto skidded to a halt, his sandals kicking up dust in the abandoned village square. Across from him, the Puppetmaster's silhouette flickered beneath the moonlight, his skeletal fingers twitching as shadowy tendrils slithered from his sleeves like living smoke. "You're persistent, kid," the man rasped, his voice echoing as if spoken by a dozen mouths at once. "But persistence won't save you from what's coming." Naruto gritted his teeth, his fingers tightening around a kunai. "Save the monologuing for someone who cares." He shot back, already darting forward, his body a blur of orange and determination. The first clash was a storm of steel and shadow. Naruto's kunai met one of the Puppetmaster's writhing tendrils, the impact sending sparks flying as the inky darkness recoiled, only to lash out again with renewed ferocity. The tendrils split mid-air, becoming a web of slicing edges, forcing Naruto into a desperate backflip. He barely landed before another shadow spear shot toward his ribs. With a grunt, he twisted, feeling the wind of its passage graze his side. "Damn it, these things are fast," he muttered, eyes darting for an opening. Across the battlefield, the Puppetmaster chuckled, his hollow laughter bouncing off the crumbling walls. "You see now, don't you? My shadows don't just obey, they think." As if to prove his point, one of the tendrils suddenly coiled into the shape of a snarling wolf, its maw gaping as it lunged. Naruto barely had time to form a single-hand seal. Shadow Clone Jutsu. 3 copies burst into existence, 2 intercepting the wolf with a flurry of punches while the third vaulted overhead, hurling shuriken toward the Puppetmaster's exposed back. But the man didn't even turn. The shadows at his feet surged upward, forming a jagged shield that swallowed the projectiles whole. Naruto's heart pounded. This guy wasn't like any opponent he'd faced before. The shadows moved with eerie intelligence, anticipating his strikes, adapting mid-fight. He needed a new strategy, fast. Channeling chakra into his legs, he shot forward again, this time feigning left before pivoting hard right, his fist glowing with swirling blue energy. Rasengan. The Puppetmaster's eyes widened a fraction, but the shadows reacted faster, converging into a thick, writhing barrier. The Rasengan struck with a deafening crack, the force sending shockwaves through the ground, but when the dust cleared, the barrier held, though barely. The Puppetmaster staggered back, his smirk faltering for the first time. "Impressive," he admitted, wiping a trickle of blood from his lip. "But let's see how you handle this." His hands wove through a series of intricate seals, and the shadows beneath him erupted like a geyser, spiraling into the air before condensing into a towering, humanoid figure, a monstrous puppet forged from pure darkness, its eyes glowing crimson. Naruto's stomach dropped. "You've got to be kidding me," he breathed. The battle escalated in an instant. The shadow puppet moved with terrifying speed, its limbs elongating into whip-like blades that carved trenches into the earth. Naruto ducked and weaved, his muscles screaming as he pushed his body beyond its limits. One misstep, and a blade grazed his arm, drawing blood. He hissed but didn't slow. Think. His clones had been shredded in seconds, his Rasengan barely scratched the surface. There had to be a weakness. Then it hit him. The Puppetmaster wasn't just controlling the shadows, he was connected to them. Every time Naruto had landed a hit, the man had flinched. The shadows weren't just extensions of his will, they were part of him. Naruto's lips curled into a grin. "All right, pal, let's try this again." This time, when he charged, he didn't aim for the puppet. He aimed straight for the Puppetmaster himself, weaving through the shadowy onslaught with reckless abandon. The man's confidence flickered. "Fool. You'll never." Naruto's hand shot out, not with a kunai, but with a fistful of explosive tags. The Puppetmaster's eyes bulged as the papers fluttered toward him, detonating in a blinding flash. The explosion rocked the battlefield, and for a heartbeat, the shadows wavered, their forms flickering like a dying flame. Naruto didn't waste the opening. With a roar, he poured every ounce of chakra into his palm, the Rasengan swelling larger than ever before. "This ends now." The Puppetmaster barely had time to raise his arms before the attack connected. The impact sent him crashing through a wall, the shadow puppet dissolving into smoke as his control shattered. Dust billowed as Naruto panted, his limbs trembling from exertion. For a moment, silence reigned. Then, from the rubble, a weak laugh bubbled up. You're something else, kid." The Puppetmaster staggered to his feet, his cloak in tatters, but his grin was back, wider, wilder. But the night's not over yet. His remaining shadows coiled around him like a second skin, his body beginning to warp, to twist. Naruto's blood ran cold. Whatever was coming next, he knew one thing for sure, the real fight was just beginning. The air was thick with the scent of burning chakra as Naruto skidded across the shattered battlefield, his breath ragged. Before him, the Puppetmaster, Kanko, loomed like a specter, his shadowy constructs whispering taunts that slithered into Naruto's mind. "You're weak, just like your father before you," the shadows hissed, their voices a chorus of doubt. Naruto gritted his teeth, his fingers digging into the earth as he pushed himself up. He wouldn't fall here, not when the fate of the hidden leaf hung in the balance. Kanko's puppets, grotesque amalgamations of wood and shadow, lunged, their joints creaking with unnatural speed. Naruto barely dodged, flipping backward as a blade grazed his side. Blood trickled, but he barely felt it. His focus was on Kanko's mocking grin, the way the man's fingers danced like a spider weaving its web. "You can't win," Kanko sneered. My shadows know your every move before you do. Naruto's fists clenched. He'd heard enough. With a roar, he surged forward, his Rasengan spiraling to life in his palm. The puppets intercepted, but Naruto twisted midair, his clone feigning left while he struck right. The explosion of energy sent splinters flying, but Kanko barely flinched. Shadows pooled at his feet, rising like tendrils to reform the shattered puppets. Persistent, aren't you? Kanko sighed. But persistence won't save you. Naruto's muscles burned. He'd been fighting for hours, his chakra reserves dwindling. But giving up wasn't an option. He thought of Sasuke, of Sakura, of everyone who believed in him. I'm not just fighting for me, he growled. His eyes flickered with determination, the nine tails chakra surging through him in a crimson wave. Kanko's smirk faltered as Naruto's speed tripled. The blonde was a blur, his strikes landing faster than the shadows could predict. A kunai lodged itself in Kanko's shoulder, and for the first time, pain flashed across his face. Impossible. He spat. Naruto didn't let up. He wove hand signs, summoning a barrage of shadow clones that swarmed Kanko from all sides. The puppets lashed out, but Naruto's clones sacrificed themselves, buying him the split second he needed. With a final, desperate lunge, Naruto drove his Rasengan into Kanko's chest. The impact sent shockwaves through the battlefield, the ground cracking beneath them. Kanko gasped, his puppets crumbling to dust as the shadows recoiled. How? He choked out. Naruto's voice was steady. Because I'm not alone. The shadows writhed, their whispers turning to screams as they dissipated into nothingness. Kanko collapsed, his body finally yielding. The silence that followed was deafening. As the dust settled, Naruto staggered, his vision swimming. He'd done it. But the cost was clear, the village lay in ruins, and the scars of battle ran deep. Yet, as the sun broke through the clouds, he saw the survivors emerging, their eyes wide with awe and gratitude. The Puppetmaster's reign of terror was over. In the days that followed, the Hidden Leaf began to rebuild. Naruto's victory wasn't just his own, it was a testament to the strength of bonds, of refusing to let darkness win. Kanko's defeat sent ripples through the shinobi world, a warning to those who sought power through fear. And as Naruto stood atop the Hokage monument, gazing at the village he'd saved, he knew this was only the beginning. The shadows had been silenced, but the light of his resolve burned brighter than ever. The future was theirs to shape.